Good evening, all. It is Wednesday, October 1st, 2014, and you are listening to 91.7 KVRX, student-run radio based out of the University of Texas at Austin. I'm your host, Audrey the Giant, and this is Element 79. Tonight, Element 79 will be featuring The Kingdom Within, a documentary about Christianity and yoga, which had its world premiere at the Zanzibar International Film Festival this summer, and its U.S. premiere at the Awareness Film Festival about 2 weeks ago now. I'm very excited to announce that I have Bob Peck, director, joining me in the booth.
What's up, Audrey?
What's up?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. All right, so before we delve into the meat of the program, listeners, just so you all have an idea of...
First, an appetizer.
Yes, an appetizer. Or tapas, or... I don't know, I'm not a foodie, so I don't...
Chips and dip.
Something like that. Listeners, just so you all have an idea of what the next 45 minutes have in store for you, first we're going to briefly introduce the film before delving into discussion about some of the central ideas in it. That will be followed by talks of the post-production process and news about The Kingdom Within's recent U.S. premiere. We'll also be taking intermittent breaks and playing some songs that are relevant to The Kingdom Within. So to get things started, Bob, why don't you give us a brief synopsis?
Okay, sure. So it kind of all began with a series of megachurch pastors, specifically Pastor Mark Driscoll of Mars Hill Church in Seattle, who came out publicly and said that yoga is demonic and against Christianity.
Dun, 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 dun.
Right, exactly. Where's our spooky organ music? And obviously not all Christians think that,
right.
but a few do. And so I thought it would be interesting to kind of go around asking yoga gurus and Christian pastors and university professors and just general yoga practitioners kind of why someone would think that and kind of what are the similarities and differences between these two spiritual systems.
All right, so about how many subjects did you interview?
Yeah, it was 17.
Okay.
Over the course of, about 2.5, 3 years.
Okay, cool. The film was completely shot in Austin, Texas, or Central Texas?
It was, yes. Central Texas, I guess more generally, was Lake Buchanan to the north and Wimberley to the south, but definitely just the hill country. The reason for that is that I was broke at the time.
Yep,
it did. Waiting tables and basically I had a camera and a truck and a microphone. And really, I think the reason that it works is because, in Texas, obviously the state of Texas is very conservative, traditionally, religiously. The saying is the blueberry in the tomato soup.
Right. I like that. I haven't heard that before.
It's very correct. While Austin is, more of a kind of a hippie mecca with artists and musicians and more open-minded approaches to alternative spiritual systems,
right.
Eastern religions especially. And so Austin, Texas really represents the kind of microcosm of the macrocosm of Western society with these two worlds.
Right, yeah. If you haven't been down here, there are yoga studios on almost every corner.
Absolutely. Next, get a margarita, queso, and do some yoga.
Yeah, you can even, I think Whole Foods even has like a rooftop yoga series.
Oh, I'm sure.
So yeah, you can do yoga on a rooftop of a grocery store here in Austin.
Right, exactly. Buy your organic goods and then go up to the top and see the downtown skyscrapers in Downward Dog, yeah.
All right, really quick, you had mentioned that you had interviewed some UT professors in the film. I want to give a quick shout out to Professor Phillips, who actually brought us together. I took Professor Phillips' class this past spring, so spring 2014. It was a philosophy class called Yoga as Practice in Philosophy. And Bob actually took that same course with Professor Phillips a couple semesters back.
A few years prior, yeah.
Yeah, and he actually ended up interviewing Professor Phillips and sending him the link to the film, and he went on to forward it to his class at the time. And
basically, Dr. Phillips stole my movie. Calling him out right now. No, you're absolutely right. He's an amazing contributor to the film. He lived and studied in an ashram in India a few decades back. And he actually has a piece you can watch online right now. I wanted to promote. Watch it after you finish this. Go to the next video, called "What is Kundalini?" And he really kind of goes through the entire metaphysical background to the Hindu chakra system and what's actually happening within this kind of increasingly popular subculture of yoga spirituality, Kundalini yoga. Really, really, really impressive, intelligent guy. So
yeah, he's brilliant. But so for our listeners who aren't aware, Kundalini is whenever you like awaken the bottommost chakra, right? And it sends like a serpent power through all the other chakras. Of
course, yeah. I know the evangelicals love the serpent, all the serpent imagery. Yeah, it's really cobra head even. But yeah, no, you're right. He basically even objectively talks about pros and cons, and that there are actually concerns in India of not quite possession, but that Shakti doesn't come all the way up the chakras, and that can be problematic.
Oh, wow.
Yes, Satyananda Saraswati, the founder of the Bihar School of Yoga, had a pretty spooky experience. Supposedly, when he was a kid, he kind of was acting crazy after doing some yoga, and thankfully, his parents took him to the Shivananda ashram instead of the insane asylum because he was acting delusional and needed help. So I think there is kind of a commonality in this. You know, you see all these YouTube videos from Christians that say like Kundalini serpent power, you know, kind of warning of the evils of that. Well, interestingly enough, in India, they're concerned about, you know, not all the chakras awakening properly as well.
Oh, wow.
So there's kind of a universality in the concern about that.
Okay, very interesting.
But he discusses it in great detail. Very interesting video.
Cool. I'll definitely have to check that out. That takes us to our first song break. We're going to hear a track called Might Light by ChooChoo. Yeah,
ChooChoo is Scott Standley's band. The main composer of the film is his indie rock band in Chicago. So that last one was Schlitterbahn by Sleep Good. The first one, Might Light by ChooChoo, is by Scott Standley, who is the kind of main composer of the film, and then Sleep Good is the alter ego of Will Patterson, who kind of contributed additional musical kind of stylings to Scott's work as well. So that was kind of from both the TK Dub guys.
All right, yeah. So the film has an original score, yeah?
It does. You knew that. You asked me that question like you didn't know. You're a liar.
Yeah, I did. I think it's super cool.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was extremely lucky to be able to work with these talented musicians who happen to be close friends of mine as well. You know, kind of get to make cool things in a collaborative way. Both Scott and Will's processes for the score were unique. Scott is in Chicago, and Will is kind of out in the hill country, out in Taylor, Texas, or out in ranch country. But anyway, Scott would have his guitar out and play concurrently with the footage to write the music, and you know, had rough drafts of the score in about 2 or 3 weeks' time.
Wow,
so
that's pretty prolific.
It was unbelievable, no question. And you know, some of the tracks even are the first version of it. So most of it was just re-recorded to match the timing of the picture lock.
Okay, right on.
So
right on.
yeah, so I mean, he was just a savant, and kind of meanwhile, Will has all this organ looping equipment, and he's responsible for the Christian church organ parts, kind of on the Christianity segments. And then Scott would take some of Will's loops and incorporate them into some of his second kind of revisions, and it was a really just cool, fluid process working with both guys. Will even was experimenting with Tibetan throat singing.
And that's exactly what it sounds like?
So he transports you to the Himalayas on the intro and outro of the film, and it's actually just a white dude in Austin.
Right on, yeah. So stick around. You're going to be hearing a little bit of that later on. So that kind of takes us into the discussion of the central ideas in the film. So within, I think, the first 5 or 10 minutes of The Kingdom Within, you state that the central premise is based on a yogic interpretation of a famous Bible verse, that the kingdom of heaven cannot be observed, for it is within you. That's Luke 17:21.
That's right. Yeah, and that's that's a really famous verse in Christianity. Yogis love that verse. Paramahamsa Yogananda, who was a big inspiration for this film, kind of a yogi master, early bringer of yoga to America. Very prolific author himself, was a big fan of any kind of Bible verse like that talks about inherent divinity. Dr. Phillips, actually, or our pal, makes the comment in the film that the kingdom of heaven is within you, sounds like a verse from the Upanishads. So that was a very clear choice for me. The original title of the film, we were talking about this before the taping, but the original title of the film was called "Why Yoga Is Not the Devil." So very saucy and juicy, and really kind of angry as originally as a rebuttal to the evangelical guys. And kind of over the course of filming, I realized that it needed a more peaceful tone to it, and really tying into kind of incorporating all perspectives. And I actually have some fundamentalists in the film that I try to portray with objectivity. And I think the Kingdom Within, I think Yogananda's ghost just slapped me in the face and said, "Not why yoga is not the devil. It's the Kingdom Within." So,
right. As a religious studies graduate from UT, could you tell me if there are any other references in the Bible of like this inherent divinity? Or is it just like that singular verse from Luke?
There's actually that's a great question. There's a 2-volume work by Yogananda called "The Second Coming of Christ: The Resurrection Within You." Okay. It's about 1,200 pages. It's freaking a brick, and he goes through every verse in the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and interprets them from a yogic context. So there's this line that a lot of more evangelical Christians tend to defend and kind of confuse, that tends to defend universalist, more kind of open-minded Christians. There's a verse where Jesus says, I came not to bring peace but a sword. It's very famous in Gethsemane. And Yogananda very succinctly interprets that verse to be Jesus saying, I come not to bring worldly peace, or I come not to bring earthly, material, sensual peace, but rather a sword of spiritual clarity and understanding, and kind of viewing it from more of a metaphysical sword of, power at living in this material life, not to be complacent in our pleasure in the earth and peace in the earth, but a sword to kind of cut away the veils of Maya, right? This yoga idea of, cut away the veils of illusion. So the yogis are very good at interpreting
biblical text.
A lot of biblical verses to be conducive to a mystical read.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I would have never thought about it that way.
Yeah, so if you have like 6 months of reading time, then read that book. Yeah.
That's interesting because I feel like a lot of fundamental Christians will kind of do the same thing with Bible verses. Yeah, it's true. That's very accurate. I mean, I think it's been shaped in a lot of ways. I mean, the Nazis sang Amazing Grace. So you can interpret it in a lot of ways. Reappropriating the swastika as well. Yeah, that's true. God, they stole everything. All right, so kind of backtracking a little bit. So in order to discuss if yoga is intrinsically at odds with Christianity, it'd be logical for one to first define yoga. So Bob, how would you define it? I know in Professor Phillips' class, I was taught that the earliest conception of the word was to yoke, as in to join two things together. That's right. You're correct there. Union is, come together, connectedness. That's a big theme in yoga and Hinduism. There's a piece of literature called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which are kind of a compiled text of previous works, the ancient Vedas and Upanishads, and a few others that Patanjali, this second, third, estimated around 2nd to 4th century yogi, kind of compiled all this information into one handy little text called the Yoga Sutras, and he defines it as the removal of the fluctuations of the mind. So that's definitely kind of a more meditative read on yoga. So I guess the question is kind of where does the American Gym Studio come into play? Right. Now that you mentioned that, there's actually a case in San Diego, I think in summer of 2013, where parents sued the school for trying to incorporate yoga into their physical fitness. I think for PE stuff. Yeah, for their PE stuff. Yeah. And, they were suing the school and the school district, citing that they were breaching separation of church and state. Fascinating story. You're absolutely right. And it's funny you bring that up. We throw a screenshot of that article of the school kids in the film doing, Warrior One, and the whole case kind of came out while I was still filming. So so I'd kind of get some encouragement every once in a while and say, hey, this is relevant. Yeah. Good job, stick with it. Right when my doubts got, their most severe. But no, yeah, you're right. And it really kind of all starts with where does the religious element come into play? Right, yeah. So I feel like a question that's asked pretty often is yoga more than stretching? Since, a lot of the reservation comes from yoga's origin in Hinduism. Right. It's, and that's definitely a topic that is covered in the film early on. Because it's so inherent in the dialogue there. One of the Baptist pastors, Pastor Ryan Rush, who's absolutely fantastic in the film, he's more on the traditional side, and he says a quote in there about he says a lot of pastors out there are taking issues with people for doing yoga when it's just stretching. Right. Yeah,
And-
that's actually where I got this question from.
There you go. And he says they're really just stretching Bible verses to make those kind of claims. And I love that bit. But back to Patanjali, he uses the word Ashtanga, which is Sanskrit for the eight-limbed creature.
Right.
Kind of spooky, actually. So asanas or poses are only one of the 8 limbs of the yogic systems. The other ones are, moral codes, breath control, mind withdrawal, concentration, deep meditation, etc.
Right.
And so there's really a lot to it besides just the physicality, no question. So for me personally, I tried to stay objective about all this, but I am a human being ultimately, and so my viewpoint will be in there somewhere. After talking to all these brilliant people, I think when people start doing yoga for just fitness reasons, it doesn't have to be spiritual. Some people start it for the spiritual, but for the physical yogis, over time, it's difficult to avoid the spiritual aspects that kind of slowly roll into their practice.
Right, yeah, so I actually have something relevant to add to that. I personally started yoga as purely a form of fitness, looking to get into another physical activity that would stretch my body in the same ways that dance did. I danced from like the age of 3 to 17, and that was just how I was used to pushing myself. But then I remember, in one of my early classes, just laying in Shavasana, corpse pose, I just felt this sort of stillness, like nothing I'd ever really felt before. You often find that life is really hectic and it's like boom, 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 like this is what I got to, like this is what I have to do, especially as a student, you're always thinking about...
Write your paper, finish your
papers,
study, pay your bills,
quizzes, just,
fill up your Bevo bucks.
Yeah, just like what's going on next. And that stillness was just kind of startling, but also incredibly refreshing. And from there, that's what kind of prompted me to look into the more spiritual aspects of yoga. And I ended up, seeing in the course catalog that there was a philosophy class that Professor Phillips taught.
That's so cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, so, just my personal account. Well, okay. That leads us to our next song break. You're going to hear the throat pump organ loop from...
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
This is Austinite Will Sleep Good with some organ loops transporting you. And so that was the organ loop, throat singing by Sleep Good, followed by a original Sleep Good off the new record, Dream Dealer. That song was called
Nightwave.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right, so moving forward, which version of God are you looking at in the film, the transcendent or immanent? And for those of you who haven't taken any religious studies classes, transcendent being not inside the universe, that version of God is omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and the immanent version of God is, within the universe. He's anthropomorphic, has emotions, makes mistakes, has doubts and regrets.
Absolutely. No, you're completely right, and that's something that the film has to explore. That's kind of when you grab a second cup of coffee or a first cup at the 45-minute mark in the movie, because there's a lot of thinking going on while watching it. But Christianity has a pretty fixed doctrine of God. He's this kind of singular patriarchal guy up there in heaven, watching down on us. And Westerners tend to dismiss the Hindu view of God. They'll say, "Oh, they believe in a million gods. That's ridiculous." That's kind of in line with some of the rhetoric from Pastor Mark and that crowd.
Right.
And, that's not quite right. Hindus will tell you themselves that Brahman, the supreme being, is actually one God. It's a huge misconception. All these incarnations are merely faces of the one God. Max Mueller, the German scholar, he referred to that as henotheism,
right.
Kind of being somewhere in between monotheism and polytheism. And I wanted to also mention here, I think this is a good point to do that. The film really isn't all yoga. A lot of it is. But there's a lot of Jesus, too. I had all of the pastors and reverends and one Jesus scholar, Tom Buckley, here at UT in the rhetoric department, give some background on Christian origins, and which is fascinating for me. I had them all deconstruct my two favorite parables, which is relevant, obviously, to your divinity piece, the prodigal son and the Good Samaritan. And what I wanted to emphasize in the film is that the beauty of Christianity, to me, is expressed in those two parables, which are really all about defying kind of codes that separate us and lovingly accepting each other and embracing each other,
right.
Which ironically is somewhat the opposite of what a certain segment of contemporary fundamentalists are all about. It's about rules and preventing crossover, and when you trace it back, you see that the main guy, the original guy, was pretty all about appreciating everyone. So.
We do really see that get kind of perverted.
It's bizarre, and I think it's an attempt for me as a filmmaker and a novice interfaith scholar to put a magnifying glass on some of that.
Right. So how does yoga help Christians pray unceasingly without kind of undermining the idea of a singular, omnipotent God?
That's a great question. Hindus and yoga teachers, they usually open any of their spiritual segments. Like, some yoga teachers don't even talk about spiritual stuff in their classes.
Right,
But the more spiritual religious ones, they usually say something like, I'm not trying to convert you. I want you to make, Hindus all say that, I want you to be stronger in your own faith. Mm-hmm. There's a contemporary Trappist monk who has done a lot for Christian prayer, contemporary kind of contemplative prayer. And his name is Father Thomas Keating. And I was unfamiliar with him before shooting, but I became very familiar with him very quickly because several of my subjects brought him up. He writes about what he calls centering prayer. Which is fully Christian in doctrine. He uses that kind of rhetoric, Holy Spirit and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But in practice, it's very similar to a yogic meditation style of kind of emptying the mind and allowing God to come in. The contemplatives and the Christian mystics throughout history are the biggest link between these two different systems.
Right on. So kind of following up on that, do you think that meditation differs for like a non-Christian yogi versus a Christian yogi?
Man, that is a really good question. There's a debate on one of those evangelical YouTube channels that is probably popping up in our related videos right now, where they say, there's a very, very simple difference between meditation from the East and from the West. And it's this. In Eastern meditation, you empty your mind. And in Western meditation, you fill your mind with Scripture or the Holy Spirit or God. Right. And you have to really, in order to see the connection there, you have to really understand Hindu metaphysics in kind of greater detail. The Vedantins, which is, I think, pretty consistent with Hinduism. Hinduism doesn't really have a Hinduism proper. There's no real
it's
established system of belief. But
there's a lot of different lines of thought.
No question, and even more so than Christianity. But in Hinduism, there's this idea that our physical existence, or the physical world, is illusory, or kind of an illusion, a mirage, and that God is this transcendent being beyond our own reality. That that's kind of the henotheism piece. And so when yogis empty their mind, they're actually removing illusion. They're removing their kind of own illusory thoughts and allowing the divinity to come in.
Right.
So when you kind of peel back those layers, you can see the connection. That was really the purpose of this film for me, is to say it's not just as simple as a 45-second YouTube video saying, this is black and this is white. It's a really beautiful spectrum of gray.
Right on.
So I don't think I answered your question at all, but
I, still got a lot of good information in there. So that takes us to our next break. We're going to start with Jungleset. This is a track called A Different Kind of Crazy. So
this is earlier Scott Standley, the main composer, was the songwriter for this with a band in Austin. I actually directed this music video 2 buildings over from here back in 2010 or 2009. And it's actually, the guitarist is Danny Yurko, who was actually a big contributor to the film's structure. So these are my creative bros.
There's a creature in your throat throwing voices at me. Let him talk and he'll want to talk more. More words come out at me. The grinning Greco symptom. So we both get played by mouths like muted horns. but the places in your head are hazy at best. Makes you feel like the human sponge, just soaking in this shit like pick your poison.
Okay, cool. So that was, 5 or 6 years ago, Scott, and then about 6 months ago, Scott. That was about 5 or 6 years ago, Scott, and about a year ago, Scott, in scoring a particular segment of the film that I was really happy with, which is the story of a guy named Richie Flores. And you were telling me how interested in that you were.
Yeah, actually, so that's a great segue into our talk about the post-production premieres and upcoming projects segment. So I was really intrigued to see that one of your subjects was an ex-convict, Richie Flores. How did you connect with him?
Crazy story, absolutely insane. He's really the main story of the film. Otherwise, it's kind of talking heads about yoga and Jesus, and so with him, he kind of brings some emotion to it all. But yeah, no, he was. I met him through two other interviewees, I should say.
Okay.
When I finished filming Father Jaime Matthias, the Catholic priest in the film, I was packing up my gear, and he goes, and he told me about a guy who approached him after a service, who was a Catholic and started kind of doing yoga, and he started doing yoga in prison, and he was freshly out and wanted to retain the benefits of his yoga practice, but he didn't want to encroach on his Catholicism. Okay. And Father Jaime said, "You should talk to Bob." He's making this movie called The Kingdom Within. And he didn't really get his contact information, and so I just kind of heard his name. And fast forward, well, what's crazy is about 6 weeks later, I'd been emailing Genevieve, who is the owner and operator of Sundara Yoga Therapy in North Austin, fantastic little yoga studio. And we were emailing. She said, I really would love to do this interview. Thanks for reaching out. I have a student of mine in yoga teacher training who has a pretty crazy story, and I'd like for you to meet him. So whenever we plan our thing, I'll tell him to come. And I said, yeah, that sounds great, whatever. And so on my way there, I called Genevieve and said, I'm 10 minutes out, I'll be seeing you soon. Just want to give you a heads up. And she said, I am so sick. Ooh. Bob, I am so sorry. I have to go to the doctor. This is bad. I've become sick in the past few hours. I'm so sorry. She goes, but Richie is here, the student of mine that I was telling you about. He's at the studio, so I'll introduce you guys, but then I got to go. I'm so sorry. Right. And so I got there, met him, and Genevieve got out of there, and I started filming, and I had already filmed about 15 people at that point. So I thought, I pretty much have the movie. I just want a couple of extra little pieces from Genevieve and someone else. And I thought I was going to film for 10 minutes. I ended up filming for 50.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, he's a very significant part of the film. So he was in prison. You know, he's a physical guy. He was in gangs and kind of has a seedy past. And basically he was lacking a physical activity in prison. He signed up for a yoga class by an organization called Community Yoga Austin, and it just changed his life. Now he volunteers to serve the homeless. He teaches yoga to parolees. He's really on a good track now, and it's pretty much because he discovered yoga.
That's a really compelling story.
So yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, by a seemingly serendipitous turn of events too.
It was a little cosmic on how he and I hooked up as well. You're right.
Yeah. So you have an untitled project that you started production on, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. So kind of, I guess, dovetailing off of Richie Flores, you know, he and I became friends after the screening, and we've stayed in touch quite a bit. He teaches me yoga on a couple times a month, so cool. If you're listening, shoot me an email and come join us. He further articulated the injustices that are taking place within our prison system. In America, we don't treat our brothers and sisters that are incarcerated as human beings, and
right.
It's an important thing. And so to the next project, Audrey is as of yet untitled, but I'll be filming, focusing on kind of alternative rehabilitation programs that help to rebuild our prisoners from the mind, body, and spirit, not just degrade them and humiliate them, which is what's taking place now,
right.
But focus in on things like Community Yoga Austin. There's another program called Puppies in Prison.
Okay.
Adorable.
Yeah.
And, you know, the shelters have more dogs and cats than they can house, and so
is that based out of Austin, or is it?
You know, I think the main one. There's a few of them. And
okay.
There's a few programs across the states. There's one in Houston, and I think Kansas City,
okay, that's
and a couple in California.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they've been wildly successful, you know, convicted murder, guys that have life in prison.
Right.
I mean, it just had, you know, a not so great life thus far that, you know, they've never known love, and they get a little puppy dog and they have to take care of it, and they learn kind of compassion for a creature, and, you know, focusing in on stories like that, and really showing that everyone deserves a second chance at how we judge them, and how we not judge, but how we, you know, interact with them.
Right. Yeah. Puppies are definitely supposed to lower stress levels. I know they bring.
Really?
Yeah, they're supposed to. UT brings puppies on campus around test times to kind of.
You're kidding?
No,
oh my
to
God.
de-stress.
They know what they're
students.
doing.
Yeah, they have like petting zoos too. I've seen pictures with like little rabbits, little goats.
Oh my gosh.
So I think baby animals in general.
Yeah, it's like, have you had an all-nighter? come
pet this puppy.
Jump in the petting zoo.
All right. So just to really quick, we're almost out of time here. You want to talk a little bit about your world premiere at Zanzibar and your U.S. premiere just 2 weeks ago at Awareness?
Yeah, sure. Real quick.
California.
Zanzibar International Film Festival was our world premiere in Africa in June. And it was great. I unfortunately did not get to attend in person. My 2 producers, Cole Dabney and Michael Arnold, were there. And I think we've had some kind of a few segments like playing on Tanzanian TV, so we're blowing up on the Tanzanian news outlets. But and then we had our U.S. premiere at Awareness Film Festival in Santa Monica, which is a small film festival, but it's a cool kind of niche film festival about advocacy films and films that try to make a difference. And so we were in the kind of the spirituality category, and we took home audience award for feature. So
that's congratulations.
Thanks
that's
so much.
Really exciting news.
We were pretty humbled and stoked about that. So I guess beyond that, our next step is to do a Texas premiere here.
Okay.
It sounds like we're going to be teaming up with Community Yoga Austin, which is the organization that Richie is kind of the poster child for.
Okay.
and it'll be a TK dub and CYA kind of collaborative thing. We're going to try to do Richie Flores teaching a yoga class outside and then have it on a big kind of outdoor theater.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty cool event.
So you better be there.
Yeah, I'll definitely make it a
YouTube
point to come
listener
out.
and Audrey.
All right, well, that about wraps up this week's episode of Element 79. Thank you, Bob, so much for being here, making this episode happen.
Thanks for letting me blab for 60 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Wouldn't call it blabbing. Really enjoyed my time. So to close it out, we're gonna play one last song